My favorite Christmas hymn is "O Holy Night." Now, I'm sure it's many of your favorite Christmas hymns as well. It's a beautiful song. It's a hard song to sing, so I like to not sing it, but leave it for Josh Groban to sing it to me. I think that's usually the best choice. But the lyrics of that song, I think, remain incredibly meaningful and moving today. And in the first verse, the whole sermon series that we have here is centered around some of the lyrics of that song. The first verse goes, It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Now, it's one thing for us to sing lyrics like this. It's a whole other thing for Jesus to actually embody these lyrics. And focusing on weariness, which I think is a feeling that many of us are experiencing these days. I went looking for some statistics about the temperature of the world right now. And sure enough, I think it's pretty easy to say the world is weary. Look at some of these numbers. According to the World Health Organization, over 1 billion people are living with mental health conditions. In a 31-country Ipsos survey, 62% of respondents said they felt stressed enough for it to impact their daily life. In a Gallup 2024 survey, 39% of adults reported worrying a lot the previous day, and 37% said they felt a lot of stress. The 2024 Global Peace Index reported that there are 92 active conflicts, which is the highest number since World War II. Violence cost the world $19.1 trillion in the year 2023, and that is 13% of the world's global domestic product. 13.5% of the money that we're producing goes to funding war. In 2024, there were 151 extreme weather events that displaced over 800,000 people. This is just scratching the surface. This isn't even bringing it local down to your situation. I bet you could fill in more statistics. I bet you can fill in some stories personally as well of why the world feels so weary. But I think we can say, again, that our world feels weary. We feel weary personally. We look around, we see weariness. We're tired. We're tired of conflicts. We're tired of frustration. We're tired of economic problems. We're tired. But during this series, I don't want to focus on our tiredness, if that's okay with you. I assume we bring that weariness with us. Let's instead focus on Jesus together. And I think we'll see that Jesus draws near to that which makes us weary. Whatever your story is today, the burden you carry, we're going to look at the stories of Jesus together to remind us that Jesus draws near to us when we're at our weariest, when we're struggling, when we're ill, when we're tired, when we're hurt, when we're afraid. These are the moments that Jesus draws near to. And as we go through this series together leading up into Christmas, we're going to read straight through 2 chapters of the Gospel of Matthew. And I've chosen these 2 chapters in particular because they're on the back end of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus preaches his most famous sermon. The crowd gathers around to hear what Jesus has to say, and the people are compelled by the teaching of Jesus. But I wonder, what next? What does Jesus do after this famous Sermon on the Mount? He walks down the mountain and he runs into real life. People and their problems and their struggles, and yes, their weariness, draw near to Jesus. And who Jesus is when he's confronted with the trials and the troubles and the struggles of everyday people like you and me can be instructive to who Jesus remains today in the midst of the trials and the struggles that we have in our world today. And so we're going to begin by reading in Matthew chapter 8. We're going to read the first 17 verses of this chapter. These are the first moments after the Sermon on the Mount. So you know the Beatitudes, you know turn the other cheek, you know these famous teachings. Jesus walks down the mountain here and he runs into people with trouble. This is the first moments after Jesus' most famous sermon. So the words will be on the screen if you'd like to follow along there. Would you stand with me, though, as we honor the reading of the word of the Lord today? Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 to 17. When Jesus came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said, "be clean." Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy. Then Jesus said to him, "See that you don't tell anyone, but go, show yourself off to the priests and offer the gift of Moses commanded as a testimony to them." When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. "Lord," he said, "my servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly." Jesus said to him, "Shall I come and heal him?" The centurion replied, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. But just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, 'Go,' and he goes, and that one, 'Come,' and he comes. I say to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was amazed and said to those following him, "Truly I tell you, I've not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. I say to you that many will come from the east and the west and will take their places at the feast with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the subjects of the kingdom will be thrown outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, let it be done as you have believed it would." And his servant was healed in that moment. When Jesus came to Peter's house, he saw Peter's mother-in-law lying in bed with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she got up and began to wait on him. When evening came, many who were demon-possessed were brought to him, and he drove out the spirits with a word and healed all the sick. This was to fulfill what was spoken through the prophet Isaiah. He took up our infirmities and bore our diseases. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. Take a look at who Jesus draws near to in this text. You have a man with leprosy. You have a soldier from the enemy who's occupied the land that Jesus is ministering. We tend, as Americans, to like the Romans. We love studying the Roman Empire and all of this. But the local Jews in Capernaum at this moment would have thought of that centurion as an occupier, as an enemy. And Jesus draws near to him and hears his trouble and helps him. He meets Peter's mother-in-law. This is how we know Peter was married, because he had a mother-in-law. I've got a lot of mother-in-law jokes that I'd like to share at this point, but I think my mother-in-law might be watching online, so I probably should tread pretty carefully here. But even Peter's mother-in-law he cares for. He then runs into many who are demon-possessed. These are people who have deep struggles and deep problems, and they are very weary from illness, from being an outcast, from having people that they love being ill. They have problems. Jesus is done preaching his sermon, and he comes down the mountain, and he comes down a mountain into a world that is weary. And it's not just the world, but it's people with very real troubles and struggles and trials. And Jesus is not off-put by them. Jesus doesn't demand a nap. He doesn't tell them to come back tomorrow. He draws close to what makes them weary. But let's give some context to these as well, if we can. I mentioned that this is right after the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 5 to 7. That, of course, is Jesus' longest recorded sermon. It's the most we know about Jesus as a preacher. But the words of the sermon is often what we focus in on. But the context of it is very interesting as well. You see, the Gospel of Matthew was written for Jewish believers. It was an encouragement to people who were Jewish. They were raised in Judaism. They knew the stories of the Old Testament, and they followed the law closely in their life. And so when they see that Jesus climbs up a mountain to deliver a sermon, and he begins with the Beatitudes, and then he starts saying things like, I know you've heard it this way, but the Jewish people with ears to hear would have leaned in and says, this sounds a lot like Moses. You see, Moses in the law climbed up a mountain to meet with God as well. And when he met with God, God wrote the law on tablets and gave it to Moses and said, go back down to my people and give them this law, and you will follow this law. This will be what organizes you as my people. And Moses receives this word from God on top of the mountain, and he walks down the side of the mountain. And do you remember what he sees when he gets down there? His brothers and all those nincompoops making a golden idol. Moses has just been in the presence of Almighty God, and they're exchanging that for a small piece of gold that they've melted down and made into an idol. And do you remember how Moses responds? He takes the tablets and he bashes them on the side of the rock, and he storms back up the mountain. Now, that's probably how most of us would have responded. Frustrated, angry, repulsed by the ways of this world. I understand Moses' frustration. He had just been in the presence of Almighty God. He'd heard the voice of God. He'd seen the finger of God etch out his very decree and word to them. And then he goes down to the people who've just seen miracle after miracle, and they are making a small little golden idol to worship instead. I'd be frustrated too. But the original audience of the Gospel of Matthew, in all of their being steeped in Judaism and knowing the stories of the Old Testament and the stories of the law, would have known that Jesus was doing what Moses did. He climbed up the mountain to speak about who we ought to be in light of who God is. This is the new mountain experience. We're looking at Jesus and saying, whoa, he's doing the Moses thing. Except we are supposed to understand that the law is no longer inscribed on tablets, but that Jesus himself is the embodiment of the law. And when he walks down the mountain, the readers of this, who know that Moses bashed the tablets when he came in contact with regular everyday people, are probably listening with bated breath to say, is Jesus going to be as upset about the way we are as Moses was? And so Jesus comes down the side of the mountain, and he is immediately confronted by people with problems. Now, they're not turning their gold into idols, of course. But it is possible in this day and time to look at a group of lepers on the side of the road at the bottom of a mountain and say, those are sinners. They must be sinners to have something that terrible happen to them. Now, that's not how we would read it today, but there were people in that community at that point in time in that day who would accuse those lepers of having sin in their life, and that's why they are suffering on the side of the road. And when you had leprosy, you didn't just get brought to the local hospital and put in a room where no one else would come in contact with you. When you had leprosy, you were declared unclean, unwelcome in your community, and you were made to live outside of the city on your own until hopefully you healed. Then once you proved it, then you could come back and live with all of us. Because leprosy was incredibly easy to contract. And just being near them meant that you were susceptible to catching the disease as well. So they were outcast, kicked out of town, kicked to the side of the road, get better, and then you can come back and live with us. And Jesus comes down the mountain, and a leper walks right up to him and says, I'm sick, can you heal me? Now, the proper thing that a good rabbi or priest or man of God would do would say, don't get too close. Why don't you pray on that? Maybe give them a little bit of money for some ointment if they were really generous. But Jesus comes up to this leper and touches him. Remember, Moses at this point is bashing stones on the ground, angry at the way of the world. Jesus draws near to a leper and touches him and prays for him, and he is healed. What a difference between Moses, who, was a hero. Moses he wasn't wrong. He wasn't the bad guy. Moses was the hero. But look at the difference from Moses to Jesus. Jesus draws near to the leper and he heals him. As if that isn't enough, Jesus goes on further and he runs into more people. This time, he comes into Capernaum, the hometown of many of the disciples. Peter, Andrew, James, John, this is their hometown. He comes into this hometown and a centurion comes walking up to him. A centurion is someone who's in charge of 100 Roman soldiers. This is a powerful man and the most powerful army in the world. And he walks up to Jesus and lays his problem at the feet of Jesus. This is not who we would be expecting to be next up in line to talk to Jesus, especially in the very Jewish text of Matthew. But this man, who again is kind of seen as an enemy by all the local people in Capernaum, come up to Jesus and says, my servant is dying. I need you to heal him. And Jesus says, great, let's go to your house. We'll head there. We will heal him. And the centurion says, no. I can't bear to have you, of all people, come into my house. But if you just say the word, you can heal him from here. I have faith. I know you can. And Jesus hears this, and he looks around, and he says, I've not seen this much faith in all of Israel. Which again, I don't know about you, but that's a startling line to me. Because he's in the hometown of some young men who have left everything behind to follow him. That seems like incredible faith to me. But what Jesus seems to identify in this centurion is that he believes what Jesus says, or what he asks of Jesus, can happen. And that is incredible faith. To believe that what you want Jesus to do can happen, that Jesus has the power to heal and to heal from distance. And Jesus is impressed by this. And so he promises the centurion that by the time he gets home, his servant will be healed. From here, Jesus heads off to Peter's house, and he walks in and he sees Peter's mother-in-law lying there ill. And without even being asked, Jesus just sees the illness of the mother-in-law. He sees her desperate estate and walks up to her, and she is healed as well. And if this hasn't been enough of a busy day, now the demon-possessed are gathering around outside of the house. And if you're just like Peter or a local or whatever, you might at this point be like, why is every person within 100 miles bringing their problems here? Everyone has heard about what Jesus is doing, and now we've got literal demon-possessed people surrounding our houses and our neighborhoods. And Jesus isn't weary from helping. Jesus isn't done caring. Jesus isn't done healing. And so now we've not only healed a leper, we've not only healed someone from distance, we've not only healed the mother-in-law of Peter, but now literal people who are possessed with demons are being brought before Jesus, and Jesus is one by one healing each and every one of them as well. This is quite a change from the story of Moses. Moses needs to go back up the mountain and have more time with God. Jesus, being fully man and fully God at the same time, draws near to the worst problems of the world. So what do all these people have in common? They all need healing of some sort. And you can imagine that these are not brand new problems that people have had. There's been suffering. There's been illness. There's been disconnect. There's been people being sent out of their towns and living on the edge of the city. There are people who think they're staring death in the face. These people are weary. And in each one of these stories, you would excuse Jesus of saying, the day's been busy enough. I need some time to myself. But having been to the top of the mountain, he comes down into the weariness of people, and he heals them one after another. And our text ends with a throwback to Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 53, a common text that we read in this time of the year leading up into Christmas, where Jesus reminds us that the Messiah, as visioned in Isaiah, will take up our infirmities and bear our diseases. I don't know what your brand of weariness is today, but I suspect there are those of us in this room who are desperate for a Messiah who will take up our infirmities and bear our diseases. These are 4 stories here, 4 very different kinds of problems. Do you see yourself in any of the 4 of these struggles or problems? Do you recognize the particular kind of weariness that Jesus draws near to? Do you feel excluded from your community? Do you feel ill? Do you feel sick? Do you feel as though there's literal demon possession around you and you can't name it? You can't explain it, but yet you sense it? If this is you in any of these stories, I want you to know that this is an ancient text of who Jesus was 2,000 years ago. But that same Jesus that drew near to these very real problems sees your very real problems today as well and longs to draw near to them today every bit as much as he did at the bottom of the mountain in a town like Capernaum all that time ago. What these people do have in common as well is that they draw near to Jesus. They hear he's coming. They know he's come down from the mountain. They sense there's something powerful about him. They sense that he knows God and that he has a power that draws straight from the heart of God. They sense this. And so they all come out to Jesus. And all they have is the capacity to ask. They can't force Jesus into anything. They have no way to make Jesus do anything. All they have is a sense that Jesus can do something and the willingness to ask. And Jesus responds. And so today, as we close out our service, as we head towards the end, the band's going to come out and they're going to sing a final song. And I wonder if there's anyone in this room who senses that they recognize themselves in this story. One of these characters that Jesus draws near to is me or someone that I know. And as we sing this final song, if you sense at all that you could use the healing that Jesus offers, or if you see yourself in one of these stories, we're going to have 4, 5 pastors line up in the front here with oil, and we're going to invite you to come and pray. If you long for healing in some way, shape, or form in your life, I'm going to invite you to come forward and to be prayed for and to be anointed. And just like the people who come to Jesus at the bottom of the mountain, we're going to pray for you that Jesus will see your weariness, your infirmity, and we will ask that Jesus will continue to bear our infirmities, our sickness, our weariness, and heal us in our world today. So pastors, would you come forward? And the band's going to sing this final song. As we do so, please come forward and ask for prayer, and we will pray for you.